And then there was another gentleman. He got on early and sat across the aisle from me. So I stuck my hand out and said, I'm Jim Stovall. He said, I'm Robert Crandall, who was at that time the CEO of American Airlines. And I said, oh, this makes sense. And he said, what makes sense? I said, well, just the excitement on the aircraft today. And I said, well, yeah, it's a lot of excitement on the aircraft. And he said, well, I like to fly on our planes from time to time periodically just to see what the traveling public experiences. I said, you think this is what we're sitting here in first class and we got 3 flight attendants bringing us drinks before anybody else is on the plane, and you think that, I mean, if you want to know what the traveling public experiences, go stand in line out there and then get on in 32B in the back. That's what the traveling public experiences. Well, we were sitting there for a few minutes, and then the flight took off, and the flight attendants came by, and he asked them, said, well, how do you feel about our new incentive plan we have at American Airlines? Oh, Mr. Crandall, that's the greatest idea you ever had. That's exciting. Everybody's motivated. It's wonderful. Great. Well, after a few minutes, I excused myself and stepped up to the restroom there, and as I was waiting for someone to emerge, I was right there by the galley where the flight attendants were working, and they're talking to one another, and like, can you believe that idiot thinks that plan is going to motivate anybody? That's the dumbest plan. That's insulting to think that that would motivate us. Well, I realized right then, I'm nothing more than a passenger, but I instantly realized I know more about the needs of American Airlines than the guy in charge of running the place. And I know more about motivating his people than he does. And that's why we developed Ultimate Productivity. There are 2 things you cannot coach or train. That's attitude and effort. Those are the 2 things you can't fix. But in talking to your leadership here and working with a lot of people at Bama, you guys show up with that every day. They know that. The way to improve is to get the right people in the right place doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And that is the responsibility of management. And the way they do that and find out how to get the most out of everybody and help you be the most successful is through Ultimate Productivity. And the first way to do that is through motivation. Then we look at communication. Communication, it doesn't matter how motivated you are, if you can't communicate that excitement, that energy, that passion, and that plan to everybody around you, it doesn't go anywhere. As I mentioned, I travel a lot. I do a lot of events, and I was staying in a hotel out on the West Coast. I stay in a lot. And so the management tries to make extra accommodations for me. So as I was checking in, the manager said, Jim, we have a new plan. We know you get a lot of phone calls throughout the day and night. And the message light on the phone obviously doesn't work for you as a blind person, and you never know when you do or don't have messages. So we've come up with a plan how you can stay in communication. I said, help me with that. How does that work? Well, instead of turning the red light on that you can't see anyway, our bellman will write your message on a slip, run up and slide it under your door. I mean, that was their plan. I mean, people gathered in a room to talk about this, I'm sure. That was the outcome of a meeting of the minds, such as they were. And this is how we're going to communicate with me. Well, there are all kinds of different ways to motivate people. There's all kinds of different ways to communicate with people. There's all kinds of different ways to implement. And what we want to do is make it so that your strengths become known so the people around you can put you in the right place so you can play and play the best so we all win. When Coach Wooden helped me with Ultimate Productivity, he had the background of training some of the best ball players that have ever played. He recruited and trained Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And you know, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the most exciting and dominant player in college basketball, then in pro basketball, because he played in the right place. But if you took him, no matter how motivated he was, and no matter how well you communicated that to him, if you made him a point guard who had to dribble the ball down, you're going to have a problem. This is not his strength. So once we find out how you're best motivated, how you're best communicated with, and then how best to implement, you're in a position to win. But there are people that are motivated by more compensation. There are people that are motivated by days off. There are people that are motivated by moving up the ladder, by being involved in the process, by getting the accolades of their friends and peers. There's all kinds of different ways to make that happen. There are people that you need to communicate with in writing. There are people that need to see it in diagram. There are people that need to walk through it. There are people that need to hear it and then repeat it back. There's nothing right or wrong with any of them as long as you got the right people in the right place. And then we have to implement. Doesn't matter what we do, how motivated we are, how much we communicate, when it's all said and done in our world, there's a whole lot said and very little done. And you've got to implement. You've got to make it start. You've got to kick it off. And there are people that do all kinds of things different ways. There are linear people. They have to finish A before they do B. They have to finish B and then they go to C. There's people that want to multitask. They want to do several things at a time. There are people that like to be part of a team. There are people that need to work on their own. There's nothing right or wrong with any of these. You just need to understand those strengths. And that's what we'll be going through as you each have the opportunity in the coming weeks and months to go through the Ultimate Productivity Workshop. And I'm really excited about it. And I'm excited about your company. You know, there are two things everybody looks for in corporate America today. As I travel around, meet with the people in Wall Street and the Fortune 500 companies, there's two things they're looking for. They're looking for companies that bag the elephant and go to the promised land. Bagging the elephant is do business with the big multinational companies. And with your ongoing successful relationship with McDonald's and Walmart, nobody does that any better than you do. And then they're looking to go to the promised land, which is China. And you have an exciting thing growing and building in Beijing, and to serve and take the things you have pioneered here to China. So when you really look at being at the right place at the right time, you guys are there, and I'm excited for you and excited for what's going on here. There are two things, and really only two other things, I want to make really sure you know when you leave this room today that you may or may not have known when you came in. And if you know these two things before we leave, I will feel as if I have accomplished my mission here today. What you do with them is quite simply your mission. And the first of these two things is I want you to understand that you have one and only one right in this world, and that's the right to choose. And you are who you are and where you are in every area of your life because of the choices you've made in the past. Or if I was to put that another way, all the choices you've made in your whole life have brought you to this place at this time sitting in that chair right now. Now, as we travel around the world and tell millions of people that you are where you are because that's where you chose to be, a lot of people don't like that. Because we have become a society of people that loves to blame the other guy. Doesn't matter how bad my life is, doesn't matter how bad I've screwed it up, as long as I've got someone else to blame it on, everything's okay. So when I show up and say you are where you are, because that's where you chose to be, people will say things to me like, Jim, I know my life is screwed up. I know I'm not reaching my potential. I'm not meeting my goals and objectives. I'm not making a difference for my family and the people I care about. But Jim, if you'd ever met my wife, you would know why I'm screwed. Or if you knew my husband, this would make sense to you. Or my boss is an idiot and the weather's too cold and the taxes are too high. And besides that, Jim, I'm a middle child. Or whatever their lousy excuse is for the way they live their lives. Well, I came here today to tell you that your life is where it is because that's the sum total of the choices you've made in the past. And once you accept that and realize that you are where you are today because of your choices, then you can furthermore accept the other side of that same coin, which says tomorrow will be anything you want it to be based on the choices you make today. I was traveling on another flight not too long ago, and there was a guy sitting next to me on this particular plane. And if they ever add a new Olympic event, I would call the marathon bad attitude. If they ever have a competition for bad attitudes, and they have the marathon Olympic bad attitude event, this guy will have a gold medal too. He had the worst attitude of any single individual I've ever met. It was quite an accomplishment, actually. You just don't wake up one morning and have an attitude that bad. I could tell just by talking to this gentleman, this is something he had worked on for years at a time to develop an attitude that bad. Well, I sat down, I immediately introduced myself, and he told me his name, and then he said he didn't like this airline, his seat was not comfortable, he didn't like the city we were in, the airport we would be connecting through, he didn't like our final destination. In fact, I don't think he liked me, but we didn't get that far into the conversation. Those of you, if you travel, you realize there's only two kinds of flights. There's the conversation flight, and then there's the headset flight. Pretty much determined by your seatmate. Well, I could tell right off, this is going to be a headset flight here. In fact, I could tell further than that, this is going to be a new category I would call the high volume headset flight. I mean, I didn't even want any leakage from this guy, you know, that might get through there. Well, we take off, and after a few minutes, the nice young lady, the flight attendant, comes down the aisle and says, "Gentlemen, we're going to be serving your dinner here in a few moments. Would you like the chicken or the beef?" I said, "I believe I'd have the chicken this evening." And then she turns to my Olympic seatmate here and said, "Sir, would you like the chicken or the beef?" He said, "It doesn't matter." She said, "Well, sir, we do have plenty of both on board. Which would you prefer, the chicken or the beef?" He said, "It doesn't matter." She said, "Sir, you are a first-class passenger here on the airline, and it's really my job to give you the best service I can, so could I bring you the chicken or the beef?" He said, "It doesn't matter. Just get out of here and bring me something." A real ray of